2 Corinthians chapter 5 is where we are today. I hope. We're on number 10 in this big list of, as the teaching progresses, more specific indications of the unseen eternal realities, what we long for, what we hope for, in contrast with the perishable things of this life. We can't take it with you. That's what this is all about. Death was always present. This is what Paul has been talking about in chapter 4 especially. He was going through probably the worst time in his life so far as persecution was concerned, and he didn't know what the outcome would be. Sometimes people think, well, the apostles knew everything. No. They only knew what they needed to know when it was time to let them know. But Paul, like at this time, he didn't know if he was going to survive or not. But this is in the context of where we're going right now. Death was present, the Lord was present, and Paul had learned how to trust the Lord and not major on the problems he was looking at. You know, I don't know how much you ever thought about it, but that's something we have to learn to do. We have to learn to trust the Lord. It's not something that just comes naturally, and it certainly doesn't come easily. There is no silver bullet for being able to trust the Lord. There's no quick fix, so to speak. It takes time, which means there's the weak faith, which becomes a stronger faith. It takes time to be able to really trust the Lord. I'm talking about really trusting the Lord. When I obeyed the gospel, I put my trust in Jesus, but today I trust him so much more than I did at that time. Matter of fact, when I look back, I don't know how much trust I had at all. Enough to get me baptized, but it wasn't a whole lot there. It's easy to see when you look backwards, but it's something that takes time, and you have to understand that. Sometimes people give up on themselves because they don't have enough faith or whatever. Everything takes time, and it took Paul time. He said, I have learned in whatever state I am. He had to go through the learning process just like you and me. And I wish you'd always remember that about yourself as well as other people. When you're talking with other people, sometimes other people may misunderstand something. Well, don't throw the baby out with the water. They just may not be at the point where they can trust that. So you have to be gentle with people, even sometimes when they're in error, because they don't understand yet, and you got to give them time to learn. We needed our time, and still do, and other people do as well. In 2 Corinthians chapter 4, where we just left, Paul said, therefore, because of the Lord being with him and the hope we have before us, we do not lose heart. Even though the outward man is perishing, the inward man is being renewed day by day. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. While we do not look at the things which are seen, but we look at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal. We look at the things which are not seen. The Hebrew author, a few times in the book of Hebrews, refers to something like, we see Jesus. And a lot of people think, he was just flat out wrong about that. Well, the fact of the matter is, when you learn something about the character of Jesus, you see Jesus. You don't see his face. You can't draw a picture of what he looks like, but you see the man, which is much more important than seeing a person's face. You see the man, what makes him tick. You see what he was like. And you see him in that way. And so we see heaven. We see our loved ones on the other side when you pass through the veil. Because of the information we received from the scriptures, we can see the unseen because we know what it's going to be like. And we have this vision before us. And that's what the apostle's alluding to here. We don't look at the things which are seen, the cars, the boats, blah, 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 blah. We don't look at those things. We don't focus on those things. We look at the things which are not seen by the naked eye. We see them also. And those things which we see, the cars, the boats, yada, 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 those things are temporary. They're going to rust. They're going to go back to the earth, just like a human body does. They're temporary. But the things which we do not see, those things are eternal. Our loved ones in heaven are going to be there when we get there. They're not going to run out of time and no longer be at the place where we're going to be. Those things are eternal. They're forever. And try and think about that when you're by yourself sometime, about being eternal, never ending. Trying to think about yourself, never ending. I say you can't get your mind around it. It is huge to try to understand. It's even harder to believe. We don't see the eternal aspect of our soul. We can't see that. We know it's true because we're told that, but when you try to see it with your mind's eye, you come up empty. Everything you and I know is temporary, and that's as far as we can go. There was a story told one time about an old Indian chief who was going to let one of his 3 sons take his place as chief. And the test they had to go through was to climb a mountain as high as they could climb, and then bring back something from the top of the mountain where they got to. First son came back, and he said he could see a village not too far away when he got to the top. The next son, he came back, and he said there was no grass, no vegetation. When I got to the top of the mountain, it was all gone. And the third son said, I seen a body of water that was never ending. He was seeing the ocean. And when it come time to pick who would be chief, he picked the son who had seen the ocean. And the other 2 didn't understand why. And he said, well, you didn't go to the top of the mountain. And well, how do you know we didn't, did he? He said, the only way you could possibly see the ocean is if you'd went to the top of the mountain. You can't see something that you can't get to that height yourself. Spiritually, we get to, let's say, level 1, 2, 3. We get to level 1. We can grasp so much, but we can't grasp any more than that. We get to level 2 one day, and we see more. Things start to make more sense to us. We can start connecting the dots more or less. And then when you get to level 3, you can see clearly what you are looking at or anticipating, what you hope for. It has to do with our growing in faith. It takes time, and you can't give up on yourself. The farther you go personally, the farther you go in faith and love, etc. Just takes time, a lifetime, never ends, never ends. But it's wonderful that we get to grow. Here's where we're supposed to actually begin. Facing death confidently. We got to die, and we all know that. What happens when it's time for us to die? Or what happens when we get close to death, with illness or whatever? How are we going to behave? How are we going to feel? What will we be like? Paul, he faced death with confidence. As a matter of fact, he said, there's a part of me, I'd rather go ahead and die and be with the Lord as to stay here. But there's another part of me that can still be helpful here on the earth. I am torn between the two. And that's the way people of faith are. They're torn between the two. They want to go and be with the Lord, but they don't want to leave, mostly, I think, at least for me, his family. You don't want to leave them behind. You want to be around and holler at them, tell them when they're goofing. It's a dilemma, to put it lightly. It's a dilemma. Paul was at that point. He was confident. Whatever happened, it was going to be okay. He knew a better day was coming, and he was satisfied with that. That's the way I would like to die. I would like to be an optimist when I die, rather than be a negative. I hope I am. I think I will be, but I know enough to know I hope I am, because it's much easier to embrace death, and I think it makes it a lot easier on our family when we're optimistic. Like, I'm speaking, most of us who are older, when we're optimistic about what's coming, heaven. I think it makes it easier on our families when we pass, because the first thing out of their mouth, well, he feels better now. He's not hurting anymore. And they get some satisfaction out of that. I've always thought, I've held a lot of funerals through the years, been with a lot of people through sickness and death, and I've always noticed this kind of a reaction from people, and I thought to myself that I think one of the best gifts we can leave for our family is their knowledge of our faith, because they can find comfort. They can find comfort. I buried people who weren't prepared to meet the Lord, and there was no comfort, nothing. Well, there was pain, actually, because you fear what's going on in their life. But when people who are godly people pass away, we find a degree of comfort from that very fact. And when someone dies, that's about the only thing important at that moment in our life, is this separation. Everything else falls by the wayside. But this separation is a big, big deal. And having hope is by far superior to being hopeless. So I think I owe it to my family also to live a godly life, so that I can leave them an inheritance that can only be left in the Lord. Just think about that. It's important. It will be important. He gives 4 solid motives for his confidence. That's what this section is, the 18 verses, is why he was confident. Well, actually, it's only the first 8 verses, but this is the reason for his confidence. Number 1, the next body's going to be better than the one I got now. That's good. Number 2, the next life is going to be a perfect life. Number 3, the next existence fulfills God's purpose. God created us for a reason. The reason is for us to be in heaven. So when we enter into the next life, God's purpose is being fulfilled, finally, in our life. And that's why we were made in the first place. Number 4, the next dwelling is with the Lord. That is, of course, being in heaven. A young man one time, he was, this is off script. He was, he had a bad feeling about the Lord. The reason was that some people were going to go to hell. They were going to perish. And I said, well, that's what life's about, giving us a chance, to choose one or the other. And he said, yeah, but what I don't understand, if God knows all things, if God knows who's going to be saved and who's going to be lost, not predestination, but foreknowledge, God knows who's going to be saved and who's going to be lost, why did he let those who are going to be lost come into the world in the first place? And he was upset with the Lord because of that. Why did he let them be born, conceived and born, if he knew beforehand that they were going to lose their souls? Why would he make it possible for those people to suffer in hell? This kid was about 18 years old. It was at camps where it was. I get some really good questions up here. How would you answer that question?
Well, those people are necessary for the rest of us to develop the qualities of God.
That's one of the hardest things I had to try to explain. People who were lost because of it was their choice. Okay, the blame lies squarely on their shoulders. But those who are lost play a key role in the life of those who will be saved. We know that we have to be tested and tried during life. We had to learn to overcome various things. And one of those things we had to overcome was pride. Other people, many times, will do something to us, and because we have pride, we want to strike back. That is one way to learn growth. We learn to restrain ourselves. Each time we're put in such a situation, we're learning to restrain or control ourselves. And that takes a lot of time. We're learning everything that's involved. We learn not to follow the leader. We learn to stand on our own 2 feet. I don't care what other people are doing. I'm going to do my thing. And just because everybody else is doing that doesn't mean I have to do it. I'm better than that. I know better than that. And I'm not going to go with the crowd. We learn that kind of stuff. We learn to be individuals. We learn to make our own personal decision as to who our leader is going to be. Whether we're going to follow people, whether we're going to follow a political party, whether we're going to follow a national statement. We learn to think for ourselves. And when right is not right, we call it wrong. that is a very hard thing to try to get people to understand. But those who are going to be lost play a critical role in our salvation by testing us, tempting us. Then, of course, there's the lust of the flesh and all the other stuff. But while it may seem cruel to an 18-year-old boy, the fact of the matter is every person, each one of us, choose for ourselves what we're going to do. Will I follow the crowd? Well, you chose to follow the crowd. You can't get out of personal responsibility. We all make a decision. Everything we do. I'm here today because I made a decision. This is what I'm going to do. I chose to do it. Nobody made me teach Bible classes. Some people wanted me to teach a Bible class, and I thought about it, yes or no. And I thought, well, yes, that was my choice, becoming a Christian. I became a Christian because I wanted to. It was my decision. I had something I wanted, or God had something I wanted, and that, of course, began with eternal life. Everything we do, it's our choice. And so we always, want to blame somebody else for what we've done. Flip Wilson used to say, "The devil made me do it." Other people can tempt us, but they don't make us. That's our choice. So anybody who's condemned, even the people I love very dearly, that was their choice. That's what they chose in life. And I'm not going to try to hold God responsible for it. Some people do. I wish they didn't. But that can keep them from obeying the gospel. So many things to deal with. Anyway, number one, the next body is the better body. In verse 1, he said, "For we know that if our earthly house, this tent, is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heaven." When you break it down and analyze it, he says, "For we know." It's not a speculation, it's a promise of God. The Greek word for know there is gnosis. It means to possess factual knowledge. The word of God to Paul was as evident as seeing a person shoot another person up close. It's just as good a evidence as gravity, or proving the existence of what we can't see, i.e. gravity. So is the Word of God to those who believe. Because God said it, I know. My knowledge is based on the fact that God said it. That's all it takes for me. If God said it, I know it's true. That's the end of the story. Do I ever analyze it and see if it's correct? Absolutely. I analyze all of it. That's why it takes so much time. But when you come to the end of your search, you know. I know because I've seen the evidence, and it's rock solid. That's what Paul's talking about. It's not speculation. We're not shooting into the dark. We're not wishing on a star like so many people accuse us of doing. I know. I believe because I know, and I know because I've seen the evidence. It's solid. And we go from there. It makes it much easier to determine what we will believe. We know, what do we know? That if our earthly house, this tent, is destroyed, if it's destroyed, I believe the Hebrews author said it is appointed for all people to die. Everyone must die. Why is he saying if? He could have just said, we know that if I die. If? Paul knows something we didn't know. The reason I said all that was premillennialists, which most denominations are, they teach what premillennialism. Okay, it's a very long thing to talk about, and I don't want to. But one of the tenets of premillennialism, it's hard to say that word. I'm tongue-tied. And you start shaking all them L's around, and I get my head rattling. Premillennialism has a tenet called the rapture. Okay? That's what they say Paul's saying here. Paul knows that he might be raptured, which means he would be taken up to God before he died death as we know death to be. Paul believed he would be raptured. Okay, we know that if. Well, there's some truth to that. Whoever is here when the Lord comes back, they're not going to die the way people normally die. Paul said we're going to be changed in a moment, in a twinkling of an eye. This mortal must put on immortality. They're not going to die like so many have before them, because they're going to be changed. It has nothing to do with a rapture. It has to do with the last day. And the Lord wants to provide a tabernacle for all those souls to live in while they go into their eternal destiny. That's what he's talking about. When they start talking about the rapture, that's not it. Okay? He does have a reason for saying if, though, because we just don't know. If I die, okay? Maybe the Lord come back today. We won't have to turn to dust. If our earthly house, of course we know that earthly house is this body, is destroyed. The Bible teaches that the body dies. It never says the spirit dies. In James 2:26, he said the body without the spirit is dead. Okay? The body is dead. The reason the body's dead is because it's separated from its life source, and that is the spirit. As long as the spirit, think of the spirit maybe like a battery, and the body like a flashlight. As long as the battery is in the flashlight, there will be light. But when the battery and the flashlight are separated, then the flashlight, rather, is a useless thing. We know that. We know that because the Lord has told us that. Well, we know that when we die, in essence, we have a building from God. Well, I got more here than I thought I did. The Greek word for tent is skonoma. You find it in John chapter 1, verse 14. You remember in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Verse 14 now, the Word became flesh. Skonoma. What does that mean? The Word tabernacled among us. In other words, the Word, which is Jesus, of course, the Word put on flesh and lived among men. It sounds like putting on a suit or something. And I guess in a way, that's kind of what it was like. But well, that's the way we were at conception. We were put on a body when our soul was created. Anyway, the Word became flesh and dwelt among a tabernacle among us. We beheld His glory. We seen the glory of God right there in our presence. And He was full of grace and truth. Peter uses the same word, 2 Peter 1:13 and 14. I think it right, as long as I am in this tent body, to stir you up by reminding you, knowing that shortly I must put off my tent, just as the Lord Jesus Christ showed me. What does shortly mean? I don't know. How old was Peter when he wrote the letter? I don't know that either. Did he have special divine knowledge? Very possible. But he could have made the same statement without special knowledge from God. The fact of the matter is, the older you get, the closer you are to death, especially if you're sitting in prison and you're being tried for capital crime. Peter knew crucifixion was just around the corner. And shortly I must put off this body. Put off one, and then in the resurrection he will receive another one. They know that. We have a building from God. Leaving the tent is fitting. The tent. The tent implies temporary. The temporary dwelling. It wasn't meant to last long. Just 70. And then we get a new tent to wear. Jacob said to Pharaoh, the days of the years of my pilgrimage. The language of these people, they knew a lot, and they believed a lot. As a matter of fact, their faith in God in maybe greater than a lot of people today, because that they speak about these things with a very definite knowledge of them. They were taught by God, and they believe what God said with regards to wearing a tent, putting it off, receiving another tent. The years of my pilgrimage is 130 years. They have not attained the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the day of their pilgrimage. Of course, that goes all the way back to Adam. You know, they lived 900 and something years. Jacob only lived 130 years. He said, but I realized this was a pilgrimage, as did my fathers before me. They knew it was a pilgrimage too, temporary, and then move on to another place. That second part's the important part. I think we know we're going to be here temporarily. It's the fact that we can be in a good place when we leave this place, as opposed to a bad place. That's the exciting part. David was aware of the human condition. 1 Chronicles 29:15, we are aliens and pilgrims before you, as were all our fathers. Some people attempt to see or view Old Testament characters as very ignorant. And the truth of the matter, they were not ignorant at all. Matter of fact, they were highly intelligent. It was just, think about this now. It was just several years, not many years at all, after the creation of Adam, that men were bringing steel, brass, all kinds of metals out of the earth, and they were making things from those metals. They were smelting the metals. They were apparently they were making molds where they could make metal objects. You can read about the musical instruments that they used in the early part of the book of Genesis. Do you know how intelligent they had to be to do that? Can you imagine them knowing or learning the hard way, learning how to extract these metals out of the earth, to smelt them, separate the metal from the dross, and then fashion something like a mold in which they could mold a saxophone or whatever it was they played. The intelligence level of those people shocked me. They weren't specially endowed with knowledge. Adam may have been born very knowledgeable, and his descendants may likewise have shared in some of that knowledge. I don't know what happened back then, but it's absolutely astonishing to think about the knowledge them people had. Anyway, they knew that they were temporary. They knew that they were pilgrims, sojourners. They knew they were just passing through, and they would do their thing for their 930 years, and then they would move on to another place. This isn't something that's come on the scene recently, like so many people say. They say it wasn't an Old Testament doctrine, it's a New Testament doctrine. That's not true. You go all the way back to Adam with this kind of knowledge. They all had it. We are aliens and pilgrims. And again, in Psalm 119:19, David said, I am a stranger in the earth. Do not hide your commandments from me. What was the importance of those commandments? That's my light. Okay, and he understood that. I am a stranger here on this earth. Let your light shine so I can see where I'm going and where I want to go. I can know what to stay away from. Give me your commandments and light up my life. All these things David knew and he believed. I don't know if you ever do it. I do it all the time. But do you ever compare your belief to these people's belief? Do I believe like these people did? They were not simpletons. They were very knowledgeable, and they were men and women of incredible faith, at least to me. It just blows my mind sometimes. The apostles taught the same things about our temporary status here. I beg you, as sojourners and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul. I've always used a little silly example of renting a motel room. I've rented several through the years, but I never went out and bought a gallon of paint and painted the room. I'm not going to invest in that room. Why? It's not mine. I rent it for a day, then I'm out of it. Well, why invest in the here and now? What did the Lord say? Lay up your treasures in heaven where nothing can happen to them, and they'll be there waiting for you when you arrive. Makes a lot of sense. But again, what's important? Do I believe it? The faith. You got the faith. That's what keeps our head above water, is the faith. Hebrews 11:13, the author said, these, speaking about this is called the Heroes of Faith chapter. He's spoken about them, some of them. He said, these all died in faith, not having received the promises. They knew a promise was coming from God, and they walked by faith towards that promise. But, he said, they didn't receive that promise in their lifetime. They died without having attained it. But, he said, even though they didn't see it or receive it, having seen those things from afar, they were assured of them. They could see the promises of God in the far future, so they would suspect. And they were assured that God will keep his promises. So they walked the earth in faith. That's what faith does. It keeps on keeping on. They embraced the promises, and of course this caused them to confess that they were strangers and pilgrims in the earth. Do I see myself as a stranger and a pilgrim? Do I see myself as a temporary person? I've got a deed to some land, my name's on it, but what does it mean? Really, it means nothing in the end. I mean, it keeps people off my land while I'm living, but, I really don't own the land. They ain't telling how many people owned it before I did, and now I'm claiming what they owned. Why? Because we're temporary, and we know it. So why invest in the here and now when there's so much before us that we can lay our hands on? Think about it. Now they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city He has prepared for them. You know, God has prepared something for us. Where is that thing He prepared? In John 14, Jesus told the apostles, I go to prepare a place for you. What is He saying? I'm leaving the earth and I'm going somewhere else, and when I get there, I'm going to prepare a place for you to live when you get here. Does it sound like Jesus was going somewhere else besides here? Well, certainly it does. Well, my question is this. If Jesus went somewhere else to prepare a place for me to live, how can heaven be on the earth? There are several actually, who are teaching that heaven is going to be on the earth. The earth is going to be refurbished, and we're going to inhabit the earth. This will be heaven. And yet everything in Scripture teaches that heaven is somewhere else. It teaches that heaven is God's home, and God is there in His home. If that's true, and it obviously is because God said so, then how can heaven be here? I just put that in the back of your mind. You'll need it one day. We'll stop here, God willing. We'll make a grand leap and go to verse 2.